Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another edition. I am delighted to have Joetta Johnson with us. Joetta and I have known each other how long? 10-ish years?
It's got to be longer than that. Probably like 15 years.
Time goes by really quick and quicker when you have the amount of gray hair that I do. And I thought it would be delightful to have you on. You have such an interesting niche in the world of finance and really compelling story. And we just want to learn more about you and everything that has led up to you doing the work that you do. And I think that the interesting thing to me is you were quite corporate in the beginning with a firm called Deloitte and Touche, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And that back in the day, that there were 4 big accounting firms, and Deloitte was one of the 4 big ones. How did you come about that? What got you into such a typical corporate job?
That's a good question. Yes. So at the time, I was going to school at Portland State University, and I was going there for business with an emphasis on accounting. And so really it was one of my first big manifestation projects. And so I went about it where it was like, I knew I wasn't going to be an accountant sitting in an office doing taxes. That was very clear to me. So I asked myself the question, like, what would be the best outcome for me coming out of this degree and this education? Like, what would be the best I could go for? And it was definitely working for, I think even at the time, it was the big 6. It was the big 6 accounting firms, which has, merged and downsized to 4 now. And so I had my sights on that. And so I remember being in college and researching like what firms are the best firms to go and work for. And so I researched all the big 6 and I determined the path of how I would get into one of these big 6 companies. And that path worked. And I interviewed with all of those companies. And I selected this particular one because they each have a very different culture. And so I kind of also wanted to move, and I was trying to move to Maui. And so I thought, oh, they have an office in Maui. This is great. And so I went and interviewed in Maui, and it was clear it would be a difficult road for me, given I didn't know anybody there. It's just like I just wanted to move there. It was my project of what could I manifest in my life. That was an upgrade. But they gave me an offer in San Francisco, and I took it. And it was very exciting to be moving to San Francisco and be in the heart of the city. And it was an incredible experience. I got to work with incredibly talented, smart people. And I learned a lot very, very quickly. And so I'm very grateful for that experience that I had.
Yeah, that all sounds very intentional. What was your undergrad in?
That was my undergrad. It was in business with an emphasis on accounting.
On accounting. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you went to work for Deloitte, but not with the intention of being an accountant.
Not really. No.
What lit you up about that? What was resonating?
I think it was understanding money. It was more about understanding business and money. And I knew it was an environment where, because you're put under a lot of pressure in those companies and these accounting firms, and I was an auditor. And so it's like I knew that being an auditor, you break down everything. So you break down the understanding of money inside of a business and profitability and KPIs and you just tear apart every number when you're an auditor. So I just knew something in me, the experience would be invaluable.
That makes a lot of sense. I think so often when so many of us think of an accounting firm, we think of taxes.
Yeah,
And a huge part of accounting is auditing.
definitely.
So you were there with them for 10 years?
No, I was only there with them for 2.5 years, and then I went to work for one of my clients. One of the clients I was auditing hired me as a controller and an accounting manager, and then I all of a sudden was leading a team of accountants in a
Okay.
startup hotel company in Marin County in the Bay Area.
All right.
Yeah, so I kind of worked through various, iterations of being, an accountant, an auditor, a controller. I was like leading teams and learning how to budget. I helped build budgeting software. So I kind of went through like this phase of learning a lot about different aspects of leading teams around money and how to plan for the future. And that's eventually kind of where I ended up, is learning a lot about budgeting and training other people. Like, how do you set goals? How do you stay within budget? How do you assess your profitability, managing cash flow? Like all of that, I was just really immersed in.
So that was a pretty good foundation for
Definitely.
what you're doing today. So what was the shift into starting to work with individuals? Was that an immediate coming out of the company you were working for, or how did that happen?
Yeah, that was an interesting transition because when I was in that world, there was definitely a certain level of dissatisfaction because what I saw is that in a corporate environment that most people are working for a paycheck and their heart may or may not be in it. But I saw this dissatisfaction around me in people working in that environment. And I was experiencing it as well, like the lack of maybe like purpose or fulfillment. And so I was really noticing this in a very strong way. And so eventually I left that organization and I didn't actually know what I was going to do. But I
Hmm.
knew it was gonna have something to do with money, but I also knew I couldn't go back into that corporate kind of environment, even though I was looking for jobs in that environment. But I couldn't find anything. Everything I looked at just made me very tired when I thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I worked with a career coach. And I actually went through a process that I was able to get very intentional again about what the aspects of money and my work were most interesting to me. And I knew it needed to be blended with a more spiritual foundation. I knew that at the time. And so through that work, it was another one of my manifestation projects, as seems to be like how I approach my life, is that I had a huge board. And on that board, I would write down on that board, like, this is what I like to do. I want to work with people where they feel like my best friends. I want to make a difference in this world. I want to contribute positively to people's lives. I would write things like this on this huge board. And I would read this board and refine this board every single day. And I had actually no idea, no idea of the kind of career path I ended up in. Because financial
Mm-hmm.
coaching wasn't a real big thing then,
Right.
if at all. And so through a lot of prayer, intention, writing, working with this career coach, eventually these opportunities began to present themselves. And I met my previous business partner, who you know, Barry Tessler, in the Art of Money. And she had a company called Conscious Bookkeeping at the time. And when I saw her and I saw what she was doing, I was like, this is more like it. This is more like what I've been envisioning. And so when I met her, I basically approached her and asked her to form a company together. And then because she was excellent at marketing and networking and already had a very strong platform in that way, I entered the equation and the doors just opened wide. And I just like had clients all over the Bay Area, was driving all over to people's houses and working with them. And it was incredible, incredible opportunity to just have people to work with and apply all the skills I had learned in the corporate world, but adding a little bit more spirituality into it and a little bit more psychology and connection. And, it really took off.
What really stands out to me is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think many of the components of what you teach and what you impart to other people are actually what you went through yourself
Yeah.
to land where you are. And I think I'm really struck by, I don't know if I have the right words for this, but this is this is who I want to be, or this is the type of impact, this is the type of engagement. I think like I want to be working with clients that could also be friends, if that's the way you said, or having
Yeah.
that type of relationship
Hmm.
without without any knowledge of what career that is, right?
Definitely. I had no idea of the career path itself.
That's just really striking me because given my personality, I would go the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be looking for, okay, what careers out there, and then what are the benefits of that career, or how would it be? And I think what you're describing is really a great exercise in clarity and also uncertainty. But the having the clarity, that foundation that you built is these are the components of whatever this is, these are the components that it will have.
Yes.
And then when you found that, it just it blew up because it was such a great fit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, what I offer to people is very much a lived experience. And I've done these, kind of projects on myself over and over again, and they've worked in a very substantial way. So I integrate a lot of that in the coaching I do with people. Is how do you create the life that you want and using money as like the doorway into that.
Yes. Yeah. We know money touches everything in our lives, and money does not bring us meaning, but we don't find meaning without the support of money. So that's powerful, and something you and I embrace. And I had to there's so many different ways I can go with you, but I think, or with our conversation, I think what is just so powerful to me, and I really want to just land on this or bring this out, is there's so many consultants in the world. And every time I've ever hired a consultant, a coach, if you will, I've often wondered, have they really done this? Do they know what they're talking about? Or did they just learn this through coaching school? I mean, what's the depth? Where is the evidence or proof of what they are preaching, so to speak, what they're selling? And I just don't want to go over this quickly with yourself, that it was your process and things that you learned along the way that worked for you, that led you to a place of really being yourself, discovering your passion, putting all of that into motion, that you are now imparting to your clients.
Yes,
That
definitely.
that is very
Hmm.
so. From there, you've you've developed your own business, and there's a number of things that you have developed. You've talked a lot about the combining of the spirituality and money. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that because I don't know that that will be uncommon to everybody listening to this, but it will be to some. And the first time I ever heard that was from a guy by the name of George Kinder. And I thought this was nuts. Money and spirituality were about as opposite on the spectrum as possible. And this sounds like something that you have brought to your path, even when you were looking at Deloitte and Touche. Yeah, talk a little bit about the money and spirituality.
Yes.
Oh, the hedger is working an itchy
It's
nose.
passing, it's passing by, right? Yeah, so it's been an incredible journey in that way, and I'm grateful that I learned so many practical tools in the corporate world because it gave me the, practical side of the equation. And I think what in part happened to me is that, again, like when I was in the corporate world, I was really missing the feelings of meaning and purpose and contribution, even though I was contributing to this company I was working for. and then, and then in my own personal life with money, it was very difficult for me to manage my own money, even though I was teaching people, how to budget millions and millions of dollars. And, I was teaching this stuff all the time and I kind of knew it like the back of my hand, but I was not able to apply that to myself. And I really was in a state of awe really about like, this is so odd. Like I know so much about money and yet I can't apply it to myself. So why is that? So I really kind of went on what I call the hero's journey. And that hero's journey is really about kind of understanding and going through trials and tribulations, as the hero's journey is mapped out. And so I did really go on a journey to understand why is this so difficult? Because I was overspending, I was in a lot of credit card debt, I had student debt. And so I was like, why is this so difficult? Why am I kind of going crazy around money? And so the path to understand that was more of a spiritual path. And so it was more about relating to a higher power in order to understand my own patterns. So I learned a lot about psychology and I learned a lot about the relationship with a higher power, which I'd already been working with in terms of these manifestation projects, right? Because that was a relationship with a creative force that was that was definitely moving things in my life beyond my own actions, right? And so I knew that something was leading me along this path and I was just following it. And so because that was becoming so prevalent and I would have these kind of extraordinary experiences of like, wow, I set this vision, I said these prayers and these things happened. So something's going on there. And so the blending of that with the healing of my own internal money patterns began to show me like there's so much more involved here than just kind of working on my own money psychology and knowing about money. Right. And so I began to understand that by bringing in a higher power into the equation, that things can really change when it comes to our own human patterns or when it comes to a vision we don't know how to create in our life. And so, because of these incredible experiences I would have in this movement, I began to integrate that more and more into my work with my clients. Along
That
with,
makes
I also did and have done 12-step work. And there are two money programs in 12 steps, Debtors Anonymous and Under Earners Anonymous. And these are incredible programs to learn about your patterns with money. So I entered into Debtors Anonymous at some point in my journey and began to really understand patterns. Because in those programs, you see the depth and the worst of the patterns within the collective. This is like, wow, I think I have challenges, and there's people who have real challenges, with money. So by studying myself and by seeing what's happening with others and understanding these patterns in a very deep way, and those are both spiritual programs, this Debtors Anonymous and Under Earners Anonymous. And because they're spiritually oriented programs, you also see a lot of miracles happening for people around money. So I began to, bring that into my work.
So again, that is so powerful of, understanding it, teaching it, telling other people about it being money and how it works. And then the self-reflection that I'm a disaster around it. And
Exactly.
again, that's just so powerful, Joetta. And going on that journey to try to bring together what I know and what I do are not in sync. As I used to tell my kids, let your outsides match your insides.
Hmm.
And I think that goes right back to the authenticity of what you're bringing to your work that isn't to be taken for granted because you have walked the walk. And there's nothing more powerful about that than that. You have eh, done the work. I mean, one of the things that I instruct students in the Golden Gate course that I teach is it's pretty much about doing your own work, discovering your own money blocks, your own money scripts, your biases, and in therapeutic language, doing your own countertransference work,
Hmm.
actually becoming a consumer of what we're teaching. And so many planners think that doing life planning, bringing the emotional and the spiritual together is a formula that you can read out of a book. And in your words, it's a lived experience. It goes way deeper. To me, it's like reading a book on golf and then going out and being a great golfer. It just doesn't work that way. So I think that is such a just so powerful. Having done that, and 12 steps is something that I resonate with. I've been in the adult children of alcoholics branch of the 12 steps.
Yeah.
And Under Earners Anonymous, I think I have heard of that, but I knew Debtors Anonymous is I think of that more often than under earners. But to your point, as you were talking about that, I'm thinking of the power of group. And
Definitely.
there's books written for that. You can take college courses in that, in dealing with all the dynamics of being in a group and finding out that you're not terminally screwed up.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's really helpful to hear people's stories and also what they've overcome. I have some incredible mentors out of these programs, incredible mentors that are deeply, deeply wise. And, there's a lot of accountability in these programs because of the
Yes.
structure of them. And it really I study currently the patterns of under earning because I'm really determined to help people, overcome their under earning patterns. And most people would look at me and not think that I'm an under earner. But I have a very unique approach. I'm like, well, what under earning patterns live inside of me and how do I get to them? How do I get to the root of those? How do I understand, the psychology and the makeup of under earning and how do you transform it? And so I'm really, determined to, because I have a program called Earning Power and I work with a lot of people and kind of up leveling their income and changing their financial identity. And so, I've learned so much through that particular program about earning and what contributes to under earning. less than our potential really is what under earning is earning less than our potential. Well, we have the capacity to earn. And that potential could be very expansive. And so my income has definitely grown since understanding and working with those kinds of patterning.
Yeah, and that just touches on what we're talking about is the authenticity of I've spent thousands of dollars on my eyes, so I can see better, and now my mouth is going. And that speaks heavily. It's like going to a financial planner, and your financial planner is just skirting on the side of bankruptcy or hasn't saved enough to really retire comfortably on. And kind of going back to, I've got the knowledge, let me tell you how to do it, but I'm not doing it. And how comforting it is, in addition to say yes. And I used to be an under earner,
Hmm.
and I'm not an under earner anymore. I've learned and practiced and applied the very tools that I'm teaching. And that's so powerful. I think talking about under earning and your earning power program could be really interesting to my listenership.
Hmm.
I'm thinking it's so common. And what percent of clients do you work with where you would address this?
I'd say probably address it 80% of the time.
Yeah.
Some of my clients they do earn very strongly, or some of them maybe inherit resources, but understanding the patterns, because I can identify, like, even a person who may be earning a very healthy amount of income might have challenges in their relationship to time, because the under earning program is a lot around the relationship to time. Right? Because it's like time is one of the greatest resources we have in order to earn money. But when we're
Absolutely.
not intentional and clear and almost like budgeting our time, similar to budgeting money, it's a resource that can just get, frittered away.
Well, if you'd like to, I'd like for us to pick up on that and do another segment.
Yeah, I would love that.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.